This is Boston Red. Today we remember 13 years ago the attacks that happened in New York at the World Trade Center. We will first have commentary from Jerry-Pippin, who is recuperating from surgery. He did this timeless broadcast last year, but we're presenting it here on iHeart and on jerry-pippin.com. Then we'll hear from President Obama. He spoke at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. today, remembering those who died in 9/11 and in various conflicts that preceded 9/11 up to today. It was one of those types of memorial services that remembered by the family, obviously families of those that lost loved ones. Some of the loved ones were babies at the time. They are now 13, 14 years old. Others that had younger kids that are now adults 13 years later. Timeless situations. So we bring these two remembrances together. Jerry-Pippin has been broadcasting 50 years, and he talks about 9/11 and events that surrounded 9/11 very timely over the years that we will bring this here, and what has happened since the original broadcast by Jerry. The country has become more polarized, but the last time I talked to him, he continued to be optimistic about the midterm elections coming up, and it turns out he was correct. In various states that they said, and when I say they said, punditry from the monopoly meteors and various other hired guns had predicted basically a landslide for the Republicans. We'll have a show later on Friday morning called Friday Jobber, where we'll talk about some of the polling and what a wave is. There's no such thing, obviously, as a senatorial wave. There's a House wave. We'll talk about a little bit of the history. And all this week we've been dealing with various programming on our number of platforms about this entire situation, including the campaign against a group known as ISIS, the Islamic States. That's a continuation of some of the problems from 9/11. Since that time, the U.S. military has been in Baghdad, they've been in Kabul, Afghanistan. In 3 months' time, they will be out of Afghanistan. That campaign will officially end. A 10-year struggle there. So things are changing, but the political climate is much polarized, saber-rattling all over the place. We covered earlier on iHeart the debate in South Dakota. We recommend you listen to it because some of the same issues are brought up there, military involvement, etc. And we've also talked about Henry Kissinger's new book, which is World Order. It will be out shortly. There was even a review by Hillary Rodham Clinton, the former Secretary of State, and a mentioned candidate in the 2016 election. So we're seeing these same topics floated in the 2014 campaign about militarism and how it affects the American people. As President Obama has said repeatedly, and polls have shown, the American people are weary of the so-called wars. They've been in them for over a decade now, and the new involvement in Iraq, back there again, and in Syria with the Islamic States does not involve ground troops. Very important on this day to call those issues out and how to find a quote-unquote peaceful settlement and a more stable foreign policy. And Dr. Kissinger talks about that, what's to be done. He also warns against putting the boots on the ground and reappearing there. Basically, the premise of his book is that the economies are global, thus people need to look to political stability. And on that backdrop, President Obama is joining the EU in new sanctions against the Russian Federation. and we'll see what problems that arise out of those new sanctions by the old colonial powers, the same people that will be involved in this new campaign in Syria and Iraq, i.e. the UK or the British and the French, the Italians, and some others, to a lesser extent the Germans, but now in the boycott scenario, which is just economic violence. We have that type of violence. And we're reminded of other issues out. Mr. Jerry Rice and his suspension from the NFL and his vanishment from the Baltimore Ravens because of a domestic violence incident with a fiancée, now his wife. So that is raging. Some senators, women senators, demanding the head now of the commissioner of the NFL, Roger Goodell. And that situation has went beyond Rice to that. And we're also reminded of the troubles, we'll call them, is what the Irish used to talk about in Northern Ireland, in Ferguson, Missouri, which is a spearhead against the continued militarization of police forces across America. It's just not about Ferguson. It's just not about Mr. Michael Brown. It's beyond that. It's about various people that have been killed due to the types of training that police officers go through across the United States and the perception of rights. There have been numerous cases. I was looking at one out in the Midwest where an individual was arrested on a public bench in what they call a skyway without probable cause. It was called by some security guards, and to this day people are still sitting on those benches. I'm talking about the general public. We went through that in the civil rights era. I can recall working across the South, and you would see, and not only the South, and in various other places, in restaurants, we reserved the right not to serve anyone. Well, that in itself was nothing more than an urban legend, we'd call it today. They could not do that. But this particular Skyway incident, there, it's not posted. Anyone can sit there. The local city attorney ruled that it was not private property. Thus, this individual should have never been arrested, and he was also electrocuted through what they call now a euphemism. They used to be cattle prods. These are now called the tasers. So he was, as they say, shot up, not in Rodney King style, but a handheld one. There they used a shooting type where they could literally implant these little devices in the body, and shot Mr. King, the late Rodney King, a hero out in Los Angeles, with volts of electricity, thousands of volts, literally like a portable electric chair. So these inhuman things are continuing to happen under the guise of what began on 9/11 13 years ago. Thus, the federal government gave surplus military equipment to various police departments and militarized them and turned them into paramilitary units. The LAPD department was the model. The SWAT teams now become effectively special force police teams. We've seen in Ferguson the use of the ultrasound cannons, the use of various other tactics. We didn't see the water hoses there, but they were using 40 caliber machine guns, these automatic rifles that they had. They even had sniper rifles. So the same thing that you'd see in Kabul or in Baghdad or in any of those combat theaters there, you seen in Ferguson as a microcosm. So there's a demand now to demilitarize police forces. That demand should echo very loud on this sad day that we remember what happened in New York. But it's happening in Ferguson. It happened in Staten Island with Eric Garner. It happened out in the Bay Area out there with the gentleman who was killed on BART, Mr. Grant. It has happened numerous times, and one of the reasons this is allowed to happen is because of this inadequate training. there was a commentary by some police expert when they found an audio of the shots to Mr. Brown. It went boom, boom, and then there was a halt, and that's how police are trained to shoot. In other words, to shoot 2 or 3 shots, and quote-unquote, if they feel threatened, then they will shoot the final shot. And in Mr. Brown's case, that was the one that killed him, according to the autopsy conducted by Dr. Baden. So these are the kinds of things we look at, and also back to this training that police can actually be called to the scene. They take the person's word, arrest the person, as this happened, I believe, to Mr. Ivy was his name, and he was jailed, his phone confiscated. This was confiscated. This was in January of 2014, and in July they dropped the charges. Now he is suing the police department there, and also the managers of the building that this public skyway entered through. So we'll see some results on that. And the other side of that coin is a cottage industry of police litigation, where attorneys go in and settle cases in a new style settlement that normally the police departments do not admit that they have done any wrong. They pay a sort of bounty, I guess you'd say, ransom or whatever, a few $1,000s here and a few $1,000s there. The person that's beaten up and that is robbed of their liberty, and in many cases their lives, get a pittance, generally speaking. The lawyers usually make out like bandits. So in other words, this whole system plays off of it. It's sort of like the militarization of police, the surplus equipment and equipment that is given through grants to the police, and also the types of training that they get to go out and profile people of color. We had stop and frisk in New York, which was a disgrace. That was after 9/11. Those kinds of things continue to happen. Nonetheless, let us go on to Jerry Pippin and his very timely comment, and then to President Obama. May we remember this day, 11 September, as a day of remembrance and a day of renewal and a day of moving forward on many pressing fronts. This is Boston Red. Good day.
12 years ago, September 11th, 2001, the unthinkable happened. Almost 3,000 people were killed in one incident, a terrorist incident. Actually, there were more than one. We had 4 hijackings at the same time. And the 9/11 saga has been going on all the time. In all my years of broadcasting, I've never really ran across a story that had so many contradictory remarks, both officially and non-officially, to be made. So we'll make a few of them here. Hi, this is Jerry-Pippin, and this is News and Commentary. Terrorism was born that morning, a little after 8, almost 9 o'clock in the morning in New York City, when the aircraft hit the Twin Towers.